I want to be running you through an agentic content machine. I'm running a bit of an experiment to help me scale the distribution arm of another business that I'm building. I thought this is a really good use case because you guys could just follow in action what these systems look like, how they scale businesses, and how they could potentially help you guys as well with what you're doing. So the whole purpose of this is to scale an organic distribution arm. Okay, organic distribution mean I'm not using paid media, I'm using organic media. I'm distributing that on my website, Instagram, Twitter, blogs, that kind of stuff, right? This system is going to break down the workflows, the type of architecture that's required to build such a system, the interfaces that are used to manage this system, and ultimately the workflow in how this whole thing works and operates together, and what you kind of need to do this for yourself. I'll include the blueprints at the end so you guys can just download this, follow along, build your own system. Ideally, you make it better. Anyway, let's just dive right in. So what do we have here? For the actual website architecture that this system is going to connect to, we need a couple of things. We've got a backend database. For this, I'm using Airtable. I'll explain why in a second. And for the LLMs, for OpenAI, I'm just going to use their vector database. Now for the front end of the website, I'm just using Next.js. Why? It's got out-of-the-box SEO optimization. It's got lots of templates. It's a shorter learning curve if you're just new to this kind of stuff. What we're really getting into really is the agentic architecture. Now, before I jump into that, I just want to explain why we want to use Airtable. Databases, for anything that you're doing LLM related, anything that you're doing like content management related, your database is probably going to be your most important thing. Why? Why is that? You need something that's flexible, that's not going to break if you change the infrastructure slightly, or if you change a variable, if you change an input. You need something that's modular and can grow with you. There's a range of databases out there. You've got NoSQL, SQL, just this kind of stuff you probably don't really want to know or think about right now. Why we want a database is it's going to be like a data room, right? It's going to be where you want to store your ideas, descriptions of those ideas, what those ideas look like with reasoning, with what goes into it, with creatives, with other logic, with scripts, how you're going to convert one idea into a video. This is why a database that's interactive and easy to use is, in my opinion, the most important thing. Now, you've got other options out there like Notion, Trello, Monday, Asana. These are all okay, but in my experience, when you start putting too much data into these things, they overload, they get clunky, they just don't have the flexibility and bandwidth to handle a large volume of data, as well as you haven't got programmable functions within these kind of systems. So for Airtable, you can actually have your own custom scripts, you can program your own custom buttons, you can have your own custom interface. It's very easy to tune and make it uniquely yours for your specific purpose, right? Now, when you're going to build these kinds of things, that's how you got to be thinking. You're like, why am I doing this? What is my intention? What do I need this to do now and in the future? And in my opinion and in my experience, things like Notion, as like cool and whatever as they are, it just doesn't fit the purpose of what we need, which is we need a robust and flexible database and isn't going to break or lag out when I give it too much information. Obviously, if you're building anything content machine related, you've got to stay relatively creative. So it just makes it a little bit easier to manage and maintain this kind of environment. So let's take an actual look into what this actually looks like. Okay, so this is the content machine, right? Now let's just not get too ahead of ourselves right now. Basically, I've done some research, I've got keywords, I've got topics, I've got content questions that arise from those topics. Then I've started to build out some pillars and some sub-pillars. And from this, I started to build out this big list of content ideas. Okay, let's have a look at this example workflow where I have a series of agents that are going to build out a blog for me, right? So with the electron transport chain, content pillar, talking about oxygen therapy. As part of oxygen therapy is energy production. What's part of energy production? The electron transport chain. You can see how I kind of got the idea, right? But obviously it's me and a small team. How am I going to kind of flesh this out? So I'm just going to hit this button, run description. Now this runs a custom script that sends data from Airtable to some prompt workflows, right? These prompt workflows I just host in Make, which I'll run through later, but that's going to complete this task for me. So now I've got an SEO optimized content description with some main keywords. Okay, So we're going to do an exploratory kind of content piece. Let's have a look at its crucial role in ATP synthesis and cellular respiration. Okay, I might build this out a little bit more so it's a little bit more centric to what I'm trying to actually do. But for the purpose of this video, let's just keep running through it. I've got a URL slug so I can upload it directly to my website. Got the type of content that it is. It's an education piece. I want people to save this piece. And I think I might make it a short form video, a carousel, and a blog. Let's just focus on the blog. So I'm going to check this box. Let's go over to blog here. Great, here it is. All right, so we've got the blog idea. I've got a description. Let's just go along here. So I've got varying parameters here that I use to filter the content myself. You can have as many as you want, but for now I've kind of broken it up into, value unit, a category, some key messaging, keywords, a date when I want it to be finished, my goal for the content, some optimizations. So an example being, okay, do I want some statistics in this? Do I want a checklist, infographic, aspirational? What do I want to optimize this content a little bit more? For now, I'm just going to leave it. I just want to show you how these agents can run in the background so I can use Airtable as a management system for this. Let's create a blog outline. Great. So I've just had this custom script send the data that I had available right now, sending it over to some agents, and they're going to do some of the work in the background. Great. So I've got an introduction here, got an attention, reason, benefit structure. This has all got its own custom prompting, as well as a database that has the brand knowledge, brand identity, brand values, that kind of stuff. And it builds this out for me. I've got a basic kind of outline. Okay, fantastic. Now let's create a blog out of this outline. So again, I should repeat the same process, but now it's gone to a separate agent to complete this task. Expect like a 30-second or 45-second kind of turnaround, depending on the complexity of the prompt. So we've got my initial blog here. Okay, great. Now keep in mind, this is how I've structured the prompt. You might structure it a little bit differently. Basically, I want the heading, I want the URL, categories, a now reading, the author, and then we go into the entire blog. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm just going to breeze through it. But I'll be like, all right, cool. I'm relatively happy with this. It's got good content. This is on brand. This is exactly what I'm trying to talk about. It's educational, whilst it's relatively easy to read. Okay, and it's relevant to oxygen therapy. So now, I want to enrich this blog. Okay, when by enrich, I want to add some statistics, I want to add some recent studies, I want to add a little bit more content to it that's going to make it more robust. Okay, so now this sends it to another agent. As you can see, we're breaking these steps down to each micro step, micro component. Now this will change depending on the workflow, this will change depending on the checklists that we use, the feedback that we get from the market, the feedback that we get from the platforms. This is just a very high level structure and architecture in how you can actually build these systems out yourself and how you can actually start to look at this and integrate this into your own business and operations, whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a company, a small business. The whole idea is you want to centralize these steps, really create a workflow that's systemized, and then start to work out where you can allocate it to different agents and workflows to give you more time to focus on what matters, which a lot of that is team, creativity, revenue generating activities. Because an AI agent is trained on each specific step of this task. They know what they're looking for, why they're looking for it, has a criteria for what it's looking for, relevant to the brand database that we've built. Gives it a lot more context when it's actually going to go do the work for you. And this can be managed by 1 or 2 people. The reason why you don't want to build out a really long, complex automation is you get this problem of carry errors. A carry error is when at the start of the automation or at the start of the workflow with the AI agent, it makes a mistake, and that mistake carries and compounds throughout the entire process. So at the start, it might make a very small mistake, like a rounding error, for example, like in maths, and that rounding error continues to get more and more apart from the original intention. I may have started and wanted to talk about the electron transport chain, and now I'm talking about elephants in the zoo. Very, very different, but it can happen very quickly if you've got a long-running automation where each step relies on the prior. You can fix this by adding quality assurance agents, which is just another step in adding agents to check each step with their own criteria, or you do it like this, where you just have checkpoints where the content is produced, and you just come in and check in and manage it, amend it, add your own special source, and then proceed to the next stage. Very, very simple, and you can build out these structures as large and as complex as you want. Okay, cool. So we've covered Airtable, the structure of it, how these workflows work. Now let's actually look at what agentic architecture looks like. This is what you've got when you're building an AI agent. For knowledge bases, this is basically a consistent document that you give these agents that has your mission, your personality, tone, branding guidelines, branding colors, images, if it does images for you, identity, that kind of stuff. These knowledge bases has a relatively consistent structure, which I'll include, but you can also tune it so it's specific to the role that the agent is fulfilling. So you might have script writing framework knowledge base. You might have a blog writing framework knowledge base, a headlines knowledge base, your highest trending headlines over the course of the year. How can it use those and re-engineer those? Then you've got your LLMs. So you've got if you're using OpenAI, you'd probably be using the OpenAI assistants. You've got Claude and the Anthropic Workbench. You've got Perplexity and a range of other LLMs. For these instances and these workflows, I've just used those three: Perplexity for web search, Anthropic for writing, OpenAI for structure and data processing. Then you've got your automation stack. So you can use mate.com, Replit, N8N. These are very powerful tools. Relatively easy entry. Replit does take a little bit of time because it is code-based, but again, we can do some more videos on that later. For now, this is what you want to be looking at when you're starting to build out these structures. Your prompt engineering, so you got your knowledge base and you got the prompt that's going to interact with the knowledge base to give you what you want. So you got article writing, carousel creation, script writing, quality assurance. These are the prompts and the structure in which it's going to interact with these knowledge bases. Then you've got tools. So what tools do you want these agents to use? If you've got OpenAI assistants, they need to be into Replit and hosted there to actually have these tools. That's like web research, file creation, messaging, publishing, that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily need these off the bat, and I'm not actually using any tools in these current workflows, but it's just something to be aware of as you build out the complexity of these agents. So let's get into how this all works. All we're really doing is moving data around into an environment where that data can be processed how we want it to be processed. So we've got a manual trigger, which is a press of a button, add a new item, submit a form. So this could be, hey, let's add something to our Airtable and press the button to move the data from the Airtable to the LLM. We add a new item, so an e-commerce store, maybe you add a new SKU item, that's going to trigger an automation to develop a product listing. Submit a form, you may get an idea or your team has ideas. You have just a form where they can submit that and then that will initiate the workflow. Or you've got automatic actions. So a database is updated, that triggers a workflow. An automated web scrape, that triggers a workflow. New item received, workflow. Query opened, etc. So automatic will be like, okay, cool, it's always monitoring it. It's always monitoring, and if there's a change, it'll take action. And a manual is like, okay, cool, I press a button or I initiate something, and then the automation will take place. Once that initial programmed automation happens, usually just comes through a webhook, you start the agent workflow. That's when you've got your idea, the idea turns into a description, and then from that description, I might come and create a carousel, I might create a script, a blog, or a YouTube video. But in each of these workflows, I have my own individual agent, right? So carousels, I might have an agent that does a carousel design. I have an agent that does the carousel text, the carousel call to action, the carousel headline, and they all work together to produce a very compelling on-brand Instagram carousel that I can manage directly through my Airtable. It's the same thing for scripts. What's the script headline? What's the script body? What's the script call to action? The power of using something like Airtable is these agents can interact with it, and over time, as you build out a strong and robust database, these agents can access, well, this CTA had the highest click-through rate. This headline had the highest hook and retention. This script kept the most people viewing the longest, etc. This is why you want to compound your data and you want to compound your efforts, and you own it, so you can build a very valuable asset over time. And as part of your lead generation system, this is going to become absolutely invaluable. I just want to show you how this blog writing system goes. It's very, very simple. We don't want to build out complex long automations. As I said, you get this carry error. You introduce inherent risk by interacting with multiple different APIs. If something changes in that API, your whole workflow has to change. It's a pain in the ass. Just break it up into very, very small steps and allow those steps to interact with each other through manual interactions or webhooks and stuff like that. So for this, I've got a webhook gets a record. That record is the content idea. That content idea gets sent to Claude. Claude has a background on the project and what we're trying to do. That then creates a blog outline. That blog outline or content outline goes to ChatGPT. That ChatGPT prompt has an idea on what the brand is, what some keywords are, starts to pepper in a little bit more relevant content, and then I get an updated record with a more comprehensive description. With that comprehensive description, I just add another button and I basically copy paste this process. I get the record, send it to an LLM, it searches the record, updates the record, and I've got more enriched data. Again, I do the same thing for the blog writing. Another webhook through the button, pulls the data, sends it to an LLM, repurposes it, makes it better based on its specific instructions, sends it back and updates the same record. Perplexity. Perplexity has web browsing inbuilt, means I don't need to host a Replit agent right now. I can in the future, but for now, and this purpose, it's very easy. Send all the data to Perplexity, it'll do a web search, come back with some enriched data and some items that I need that are going to be helpful to me and what my market needs. So that is the high level on what we're going to run with as an experiment. I'm going to apply this to blogs, carousels, scripts, static pieces of content. Now I'll give you the template for this so you can just run with it yourself. But this is the kind of planning that you want to start looking into when you want to build out these agentic structures. The more detail that you do on the front end saves you so much headache on the back end. You can get all the links in the description. I'll